I never thought I'd get that message. After 9 years, after everything I gave him, after he sat me down on January 2nd and told me I was a good girlfriend but not wife material, after all that, he texts me out of the blue. Hey, I know I have no right to ask, but I really need to talk. There's something I have to get off my chest. Can we meet? My hands were shaking when I read it. I had finally started to feel okay. I had stopped checking his social media. I had stopped crying in the shower. And now this, part of me wanted to block him and pretend I never saw it. But part of me, the part that still remembered the boy I fell in love with in high school, wanted to know what he had to say. What could possibly be so important? Months after he ripped my heart out, let me back up. I met Nate when I was 18, a freshman in college. He was a year younger, still in his senior year of high school. We hit it off instantly. He was intense, charming, and he made me feel like I was the only person in the world. Looking back, maybe that should have been a red flag, the way he needed all my attention, the way his moods could shift in a second. But I was young and I was in love, and I thought that's what love was supposed to feel like. For the next 9 years, I built my entire life around him. When he fell into a deep depression during his first year of college, I was the one who held him together. I helped him keep his grades up, I drove him to appointments, I made sure he ate. When his parents disowned him because they didn't agree with his major or the college he chose, they cut him off completely. No money, no support, nothing. He was devastated, so I stepped up. I was a college student myself, but I worked 2 jobs, waitressing during the day, tutoring at night to pay our rent and buy groceries. I didn't complain, he was my world. I would have done anything for him. That went on for almost 3 years. I can still remember the exhaustion, the way my feet ached after double shifts, the way I'd come home at 11 p.m. to find him playing video games, barely looking up. I told myself it was temporary. He was going through a hard time. Once he graduated, everything would get better. And then his parents started talking to him again. They apologized, they started sending money, they even helped us move into a nicer apartment. Nate was over the moon. He told me he wanted to take care of me now, that I should quit my job and let him be the provider. I didn't quit, I was too scared to lose my independence, but I cut back to 1 job. For 16 months it was amazing, he spoiled me. He took me out to dinner, bought me little gifts, planned weekend trips. I thought we were finally on the same page. I thought he was going to propose, but then things started to shift. He made new friends at work and suddenly he was spending more time with them than with me. He'd come home late, scrolling through his phone, barely saying 2 words. When I tried to talk to him, he'd say I was being clingy. When I asked if something was wrong, he'd say I was imagining things. I started to feel like a ghost in my own relationship. Then December came and he did a complete 180. He love-bombed me like I've never experienced. He bought me expensive presents, cooked my favorite meals, took me to see Christmas lights. He kept whispering about how much I meant to him, how I was his first love, how he wouldn't be where he was without me. I honestly thought he was going to propose on January 2nd. He planned this whole romantic dinner at home, steak, candles, the works. He made a long speech about our history, about everything we'd been through. I sat there with my heart pounding, waiting for him to pull out a ring. Instead, he told me he didn't see me as wife material. He said I was a great girlfriend, but that's all I would ever be to him. He said he needed to move on, that he couldn't spend the rest of his life with someone he didn't see as an equal. I don't remember much after that. I think I cried, I think I begged, I think I asked him why he wasted 9 years of my life. He just kept saying he was sorry, that he didn't want to hurt me, that he hoped we could still be friends, after everything. I moved out within the week. I crashed on my sister's couch for 2 months. I cried so much I gave myself headaches. I lost weight. I stopped answering calls from my mom. I felt like a complete failure, like I had given him everything and it still wasn't enough. And then in April he texts me. Out of the blue, I need to talk, something I have to get off my chest. I stared at the message for an hour. My sister told me to ignore it. My best friend said I should meet him just to get closure. I didn't know what to do. Part of me was terrified that he was going to say he wanted me back, and part of me was terrified that he wouldn't. I finally wrote back, fine, coffee shop on Main Street, Thursday at 6. I showed up early. I ordered tea I didn't drink. He walked in looking nervous, fidgeting with his sleeves. He sat down across from me and took a deep breath. I owe you an explanation, he said, and then he told me the truth. He had been in love with a coworker for months before he broke up with me. Her name was something like Jenna or Jessica. I didn't catch it fully because my ears were ringing. He said he thought she was perfect, that she was the kind of woman he wanted to marry, that he ended things with me because he wanted to be with her. He looked almost proud when he said it, like he was confessing something noble. I just sat there. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt this strange, cold calm settle over me. After a few seconds I said, so you dumped me after 9 years of me supporting you, working 2 jobs, holding your hand through depression for a girl you barely knew. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. I know it sounds bad, he said. It sounds bad because it is bad, I said. Then he dropped the second bombshell. He told me that after he confessed his feelings to this coworker, she laughed in his face. She told him he was a piece of trash for treating me the way he did. She said she would never date someone who could throw away a 9-year relationship like that. And then she walked away and hasn't spoken to him since. He actually looked hurt, like he was the victim. I couldn't help it. I laughed. I laughed so hard a couple at the next table turned and stared. Nate's face turned bright red. It's not funny, he said. It's a little funny, I said. He asked if I would give him another chance. He said he realized he made a mistake, that I was the one who truly loved him, that he wanted to try again. He reached across the table and tried to take my hand. I pulled back. No, I said, you don't get to do that. You don't get to leave me broken on the floor and then come back because your backup plan didn't work. He started pleading. He started crying. He said he would do anything, that he'd go to therapy, that he'd prove himself. I just shook my head. I'm done, I said, and I got up and walked out. I thought that was the end of it. But a few days later, he started showing up outside my apartment. Not every night, just enough to be creepy. He'd leave notes on my car. He'd send flowers to my sister's house, even though I never gave him her address. I ended up getting a restraining order. That was 3 weeks ago, and now I'm sitting here trying to figure out how I let myself be fooled for 9 years. How I didn't see that the man I loved was never really there for me. He was only there for what I could do for him. The coworker, the one who rejected him, she called him a piece of trash. Maybe I should thank her. She said what I couldn't say for myself. I still don't know why he reached out. Maybe he wanted closure. Maybe he wanted to hurt me one last time, but I'm done letting him have that power. I'm not going back. That story had me reeling. It's crazy how some people can use you for years and then throw you away like you're nothing. But it got me thinking about loyalty, about what we owe to the people in our lives and what they owe us. And that brings me to something that happened with my old boss a few years back. It was a totally different situation, but the question of loyalty cut just as deep. Let me tell you about it. That story had me reeling. But it also reminded me of another story I came across, about a guy who faced a similar question of loyalty at work. Here's what happened to him. I worked at my first job out of college for 6 years of my life. They trained me from the ground up. I had zero experience when I started, and they taught me everything I know. My boss was great, honestly. He fought for my promotions, pushed me to take on more responsibility, and in those 6 years, my salary doubled. I went from entry-level to someone who actually had a future there. I respected the hell out of him. Then I got an offer from a more prestigious company. Better growth opportunities, better benefits, and double my current salary. We're talking substantial money. I was making about 1,000 and the new offer was 2,500. Part of it was stock in the new company, and the salary alone was likely more than my old boss was making. I didn't even think about asking him to match it. I knew he couldn't, and I didn't want to put him in that position, so I gave him my notice. I wrote out a detailed transition plan, made sure my projects were handed off cleanly, and scheduled a meeting to tell him in person. I thought I was being respectful. I thought he'd understand. He didn't. I sat down in his office, closed the door, and told him I was leaving. I watched his face go through about 5 different emotions in 10 seconds. Shock, confusion, something that looked like hurt, and then this cold, hard anger. He stayed professional, we both did, but it got heated fast. He started questioning my loyalty, said it was a character flaw, said after everything he'd done for me, I was just walking away from. I didn't scream. I kept my voice level. I told him I believed I had paid him and the company back with my hard work. I said we were at the very least even, and arguably they got a bargain deal because I could have jumped ship for more money 2 years earlier. I didn't say that last part out loud, but I thought it. He shook his head. You're cold, he said, calculating. I thanked him for everything he'd taught me, wished him well, and walked out. I thought that was the end of it, but my wife and some of my friends said I handled it wrong. They said I should have shown more loyalty since the company gave me so much. That I was being cold and calculating. That I should have at least given him a chance to try to match the offer even if I knew he couldn't. I didn't see it that way. Here's the thing, I know my worth. I know the contribution I made to the company's bottom line. I gave them 6 years of my life, 6 years of overtime, 6 years of showing up early and staying late. I didn't owe them anything else. And loyalty, what the hell is that supposed to mean? I've seen people walk out of the door after 2 decades with a pink slip and no one shed a tear the morning after. Companies are not loyal to you. They will replace you in a week if you drop dead. So why should I be loyal to them? I told my wife exactly that. She said I sounded bitter. Maybe I am, but I don't think I'm wrong. The new job started 3 weeks after I left. Best decision I ever made. My old boss called me a month later to apologize, said he was just hurt, that he knew I had to do what was best for my family. I accepted the apology, but I didn't feel bad. I still don't. I read the comments on that Reddit post later. Most people said I wasn't the asshole. One guy said loyalty to a job is a one-way street. Another said the boss was just upset because he lost a good employee. I agreed with them, but my wife still brings it up sometimes. She says I could have handled it with more grace. Maybe she's right, but I don't regret leaving. I regret nothing. That story about loyalty made me think about another workplace situation I read about. This one was about a woman whose boss asked something completely inappropriate. Here's how she told it. I've been at this company for almost 8 years. I started as an assistant, worked my way up, and eventually became a manager. I thought I was respected. I thought I had job security. Then Dick, that's what I call the CEO because he is one, decided to make my life hell. There's a guy named Bob. Bob's been here for about 4 years. When his wife had a baby, she became a stay-at-home mom, and Dick thought that was the most admirable thing in the world. He promoted Bob on the spot. Didn't matter that Bob started showing up later and later, missing meetings, and when he was in the office, he often slept at his desk. Bob was a family man, that's all that mattered. Over the next year, Bob got promoted twice more. He went from being under me to being at my level and then above me, all while doing less work than anyone in the department. I kept my mouth shut and focused on my own team, then I had a baby. I took 12 weeks of maternity leave, worked part-time for another month, and came back full-time. When I returned, I found out I had been silently demoted. My title was the same, but my responsibilities were stripped. They gave my biggest accounts to Bob. When I asked why, Dick said I needed to focus on my family, that it was a lot for a new mother to handle. I pointed out that my performance had never dropped, that I had exceeded every metric. He just smiled and said, "We'll see." I didn't get a raise that year or the next or the next, 4 years with no cost of living adjustment while Bob got promotion after promotion. I started looking for another job, but the market was tough and I had a toddler at home. I couldn't just walk away. Then last week, Bob texted me, out of the blue. He said he and his family were traveling to my city for a week in January, and since I had a big house, he wanted to know if his wife, toddler, and dog could stay with me. He mentioned, as an afterthought, that if that didn't work, he could ask the company to pay for a hotel. I stared at the message. My house is that big. I have a 3-bedroom, and one of those rooms is my home office. But even if I had a mansion, why would I want to host my boss's entire family for a week? The audacity. The sheer, unbelievable audacity. I didn't answer right away. I sat there for an hour, my blood pressure rising. I thought about all the ways Bob had skated by, all the ways I had been pushed aside, all the late nights I spent covering for him while he was out at happy hour. And now he wanted me to play innkeeper. I typed out a response, "Sorry, that doesn't work for me. I'm sure the company can cover a hotel." He replied within minutes, "Dick said he'd mention it in tomorrow's meeting, just thought I'd ask." So the CEO knew Dick had put him up to it, or at least approved it. They were treating me like the company mom, the one who cleans up after everyone, who takes in strays, who says yes because she doesn't want to cause trouble. I didn't sleep that night. I thought about all the times I had said yes when I wanted to say no, all the extra work I took on, all the weekends I gave up. I was done. The next morning, I walked into Dick's office for the morning meeting. Bob was already there, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. Dick was at the head of the table, shuffling papers. I sat down across from Bob and waited. Dick cleared his throat. "So Bob mentioned he reached out to you about accommodations for his family's trip next month. I think it's a great idea. You have the space and it would really help him out." I looked Dick straight in the eye. "I don't have the space. My house is 3 bedrooms, I have a toddler and I work from home. I can't host anyone." Bob laughed. It was short, dismissive. "Come on, you've got that guest room you never use." "I use it as an office, and even if I didn't, I'm not comfortable hosting your wife and toddler and dog for a week. That's a lot to ask of anyone." Dick's smile tightened. "I thought you were a team player, Sarah." My name is not Sarah, but that's what he calls me when he's trying to be condescending. I held my ground. "I am a team player. I've been a team player for 8 years, but I'm not a hotel." The meeting went downhill from there. Bob spent the next hour complaining about my attitude, my lack of cooperation, my failure to support the team. Dick nodded along like he agreed with every word. I sat there and took it because I knew if I walked out, I'd be the problem. I'd be the difficult woman who couldn't handle a simple request. After the meeting, I went back to my desk and found an email from HR. Subject line, "Meeting requested." I opened it and saw it was about a concern Bob had raised about my conduct. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. Instead, I drafted a response saying I was available anytime and then started updating my resume. The next week, I had 3 phone screens and 2 interviews. I didn't tell anyone at work. I just quietly applied, went to interviews during my lunch breaks, and said nothing. A month later, I had an offer, not as much as I wanted, but enough. I gave my 2 weeks' notice to Dick in person. He didn't fight it. He just looked at me and said, "I thought you'd stay. You seemed like a lifer." I handed him my resignation letter. "I thought so too, but you made it clear I wasn't valued." He didn't say anything else. I walked out of his office and didn't look back. Bob texted me that night. "Heard you're leaving, that's too bad. I guess I'll have to figure out the hotel situation." I didn't respond. I blocked his number. It's been 6 months now. I'm at a new company. I got a raise and a title change. I work with people who respect me, and when I told my new boss about the old job, she just shook her head and said, "Sounds like you dodged a bullet." I think about Bob sometimes. I wonder if he ever got his hotel. I don't really care. I have my own life now, and it doesn't include hosting anyone's family for a week. I thought about that story again a few weeks later when I saw a post about a woman whose ex came crawling back. That one hit different. Here's what happened to her. "I gave that man 9 years of my life, 9 years. I met Nate in high school when I was 18 and he was 17. He was shy, awkward, and I fell for him hard. I helped him through depression. I helped him keep his grades up when he wanted to quit school. I worked 2 jobs, so he could focus on college after his parents disowned him for 3 years because they didn't agree with his major or his choice of school. I was a college student too, working nights and weekends just to keep us afloat. When his parents finally started talking to him again and offered financial support, we moved into a nicer apartment. Nate told me he wanted to take care of me. He wanted me to quit my job. I didn't. I kept working because I had seen too many women lose everything by trusting a man. But for 16 months, it was good. He spoiled me. He was attentive. I thought we were building a future. Then things started to shift. He became more interested in his new friends. He ignored me at parties. He stopped asking about my day. I told myself I was overreacting, that he was just busy, that we were in a rough patch. December came and he did a complete 180. He love-bombed me. Flowers, gifts, date nights that felt like the early days. He made Christmas magical. He bought me a necklace I had pointed out months before. He planned a special dinner for the 2nd of January. He made my favorite meal, lasagna, from scratch and lit candles and poured wine. He stood up and made a speech about how I was his first love, how I had been there since high school, how he didn't know where he would be without me. I sat there, my heart pounding, convinced he was going to propose any second. He didn't. The speech kept going. He started talking about how he had changed, how he needed to find himself, how he realized he wanted something different, and then he said it, the words that broke me. "You were a good girlfriend, but that's what you'll always be to me, a girlfriend. I don't see you as my wife or the mother of my children." I sat there with the lasagna going cold on my plate. I didn't cry. I didn't scream, I just nodded and said, okay. I packed my bags that night. I moved into my sister's spare room. I didn't call him, I didn't text. I blocked him on everything and tried to rebuild my life. 4 months later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Nate. He sounded desperate. He said he needed to talk, that he had to get something off his chest, that he was sorry. I said, I'm listening. He told me the whole story. The reason he ended things with me was not because I wasn't good enough. It was because he had developed a crush on a coworker. He thought she was incredible. He thought she was the one. So he broke up with me, told her he had ended a 9-year relationship to be with her, and confessed his love. She laughed at him, actually laughed. She told him he was a piece of trash, and if he ever spoke to her again, she would go to HR. He was humiliated. He tried to win her over for weeks, showed up at her desk, sent her emails, bought her gifts. She ignored him. Then she got transferred to another department just to get away from him. And he realized he had thrown away 9 years for nothing. I listened to all of this without saying a word. When he finished, he said, I made a mistake. I want you back. I'll do anything. I said, Nate, you are a lost cause, and I'm not your backup plan. He started crying. Actual crying. He said he loved me. He said he never stopped loving me. He said I was the best thing that ever happened to him. I said, you had me for 9 years, and you threw me away because you wanted something shiny. I'm not shiny. I'm real, and I deserve better than to be your second choice. I hung up and blocked that number too. It's been a year now. I'm dating someone new, someone who doesn't need a speech to know what he wants. And Nate. He still messages me every few months from different numbers. I don't respond. I don't even read them. I just hit block and move on. My sister says he got what he deserved. I think she's right. I scrolled past another story that hit close to home. This one was from a guy who quit his first job after 6 years. He'd been trained from the ground up, had a boss who fought for his promotions, doubled his salary in that time. Then he got an offer from a more prestigious company. Double the salary again. We're talking $120,000 to $250,000. That's life-changing money. He didn't ask his boss to match it. He knew the boss couldn't. Part of the new comp was stock in the new company, and the salary alone was probably more than his boss made. So he just gave his notice, laid out a transition plan, and tried to keep it professional. But his boss was devastated, angry, accused him of having no loyalty. And the guy said exactly what a lot of us think but don't say. I paid the company back with my hard work. We're at least even. They got a bargain. I could have jumped ship for more money 2 years ago. He didn't say that last part out loud, but his wife and friends still called him cold, calculating. They said he should have shown more loyalty because the company gave him so much. He didn't buy it. He said, what does loyalty to a job even mean? I've seen people walk out after 20 years with a pink slip and no one cries the next morning. I read the comments. Most people agreed with him. One commenter said they hired a young associate at their firm, smart and motivated. 8 months in, the guy came to work acting odd, said he needed to talk. His uncle owned a company that sold expensive stuff to the Department of Defense, and they just lost their corporate counsel. They offered him 3 times his salary and a partnership track. The boss said, I remember thinking if I don't let him go, I'm an idiot. He's doing what's best for him. I told him congratulations, gave him a good reference, and that was that. Another commenter said they hired a young software engineer at entry level. The company had a process for promotions, but it was slow and competitive. The engineer applied for a higher level at another company, got it, and left. The boss didn't take it personally. He said, I hired him at entry level. He outgrew the role. That's not disloyalty, that's growth. But the original poster's boss didn't see it that way. The boss took it as a personal betrayal, and that's the thing about some bosses. They think your career is about them. They think the years you gave them mean you owe them forever. I thought about my own situation. I never had a boss who fought for me like that, but I understood the guy's point. You give your time, your energy, your skills, you show up. You do the work, that's the transaction. Anything beyond that is a gift, not an obligation. I hoped he took the job. I hoped he never looked back. A few months later, I checked in on the host family story. The original poster had posted an update. She said she'd been at her new company for 6 months now, got a raise and a title change, worked with people who respected her. And when she told her new boss about the old job, her new boss just shook her head and said, sounds like you dodged a bullet. She said she thought about Bob sometimes, wondered if he ever got his hotel. She didn't really care. She had her own life now, and it didn't include hosting anyone's family for a week. But then she added something new. She said Bob's wife had reached out to her on LinkedIn. The wife said she found the whole thing embarrassing and apologized. She said Bob had been under a lot of pressure at work, and the CEO kept pushing him to be more visible in the office, so he came up with the idea of staying with a coworker to save the company money. The wife said she had no idea Bob asked her, and she was horrified when she found out. The original poster said she replied politely, said no hard feelings, and wished the wife well. Then she blocked Bob's wife too. She said she didn't need any more drama from that chapter of her life. The last comment she made was simple. I don't believe in loyalty to a job anymore. I believe in doing good work, getting paid fairly, and leaving when it stops working. That's it. I closed the tab and thought about that phrase. Loyalty to a job, what does it really mean? I guess it means different things to different people. But I know one thing for sure, no job is going to be loyal to you, so why should you be loyal to it? That thought made me think about Nate again. About the kind of loyalty I gave him for 9 years. He wasn't a job, but the principle felt the same. I gave him everything and he threw it away for a fantasy. A few weeks after that phone call, I heard from my sister that a mutual friend had filled her in on the rest of the story. Nate had been telling people at his office about his big romantic gesture, how he ended a 9-year relationship to be with his coworker. He thought it would make him look passionate, dedicated. Instead, it made him look like a creep. The coworker, her name was something like Jenna, she went straight to HR, not just about the confession, but about the gifts he'd been leaving on her desk. A bracelet, a handwritten poem. A framed photo of the two of them together at a company party, one where she was just standing next to him in a group shot. He had cropped it. HR took it seriously. They gave him a formal warning and moved Jenna to a different floor. Nate didn't stop. He started sending her emails from a personal account. She forwarded them all to HR. He was put on a performance improvement plan, basically a step away from being fired. His parents found out. They called him embarrassed. His dad said, "You threw away a girl who worked 2 jobs to put you through college for some woman who won't even look at you." I heard that last part from his mom, actually. She reached out to me crying. She said she was so sorry. I told her it wasn't her fault, but I blocked her number too. I couldn't be the one they called to clean up his mess anymore. The funny part, and I don't say this to be cruel, but it was funny, I found out later that Jenna had a boyfriend the whole time. A guy she'd been with for 3 years. Nate never even asked. He just saw her smile at him once during a meeting and decided she was the love of his life. He ended a 9-year relationship over a smile. I laughed when I heard that. Not a happy laugh, a hollow one, because I had spent 9 years building a life with someone who was willing to throw it all away over the first pretty face that looked his way. And he didn't even get the girl. That was 6 months ago. Now whenever I see a new number pop up on my phone, I just ignore it. My new boyfriend, Mark, he knows the whole story. He doesn't get jealous. He just holds my hand and says, his loss. And I believe him. I scrolled through another comment thread from that loyalty post. Someone had shared a story about a contract manager at their company. She was great at her job, loved working with them. Her husband worked for a company that did contracts with the Department of Defense. One day at the company Christmas party, she was in the buffet line talking about her work, and a guy from her husband's company overheard. He offered her a job on the spot, more money, better benefits, a shorter commute. She took it. Her boss was upset, but he didn't accuse her of disloyalty. He just said, "I'm sad to see you go, but I understand. That's how it should be. You give your time, you leave when it's time to leave. No drama, no guilt trips." I thought about that contract manager. I wondered if she ever looked back. I hope she didn't. I thought about Nate again, but this time it was different. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt free, because I finally understood that loyalty isn't about staying forever. It's about being honest, showing up, and doing your best while you're there. And when it's time to go, you go. I deserve someone who understands that, and now I have him. I closed the laptop and went to the kitchen to make dinner. Mark would be home in an hour. I was making his favorite chicken parmesan. He'd texted me earlier, "Can't wait to see you. You're the only one I want." I smiled. No speech, just the truth. But not every workplace story ends with a clean break. Sometimes the request is so ridiculous you can't believe it's real until you're standing in the middle of it. I stumbled across a post from a woman who worked at a company where the CEO played favorites in the most infuriating way. She called him Dick because he was one, and her coworker Bob was the golden boy. The CEO promoted Bob every time he had a kid, praised him for being a family man, while she got silently demoted for having a baby. No change in her work, just a quiet shift in title and no raise for 4 years. Then Bob texted her, out of nowhere. He asked if she could house his wife, toddler, and dog for a week in January. He mentioned as an afterthought that he could ask the company to pay for his accommodations if that didn't work. She was gobsmacked, utterly gobsmacked. I read the original post and felt my blood pressure rise. Bob had started out under her in the hierarchy. Then he had a kid, his wife became a SAHM, and the CEO found that so admirable he promoted Bob. Never mind that Bob showed up late, missed work constantly, and often slept at his desk. When Bob had a family emergency and moved across the country, another promotion followed. He went from being under her to being at her level. Then he got promoted again, and now he outranked her. And he had the audacity to text her asking to crash at her place for a week with his whole family. She said she hadn't gotten a raise in 4 years. She'd been silently demoted for having a baby herself. Meanwhile, Bob was praised for being a good dad while doing less work than anyone. The comments were furious. People told her to say no, go to HR, start sending out resumes. One commenter said, "This is the problem with staying in toxic jobs too long. You get habituated to the chaos and your normal meter breaks. OOP is severely underreacting." Another said, "Yep, just another crazy woman on the rag." I don't know how many of my husband's friends have said they divorced because their wives were crazy. Last year, one of his friends died, found out he was a cheating pose, so yeah, that excuse is often thrown around. She responded to that comment saying she knew the double standard all too well. If she said no, she'd be called difficult. If she said yes, she'd be a doormat. She was stuck. I kept reading. She posted an update a few days later. She said she had the meeting with Dick, the CEO, and he did mention the request. He said, "Bob mentioned you might be able to help him out with accommodation. That would really show team spirit." She said she looked him in the eye and said, "I'm not hosting anyone. I don't have the space." Dick frowned. He said, "It's just a week. Think of it as a favor to me." She didn't flinch. She said, "I already said no. If Bob needs a hotel, the company can pay for it. That's not my problem." Dick got quiet. Then he said, "I'm disappointed in your attitude." She said, "I'm disappointed in my raise or lack thereof." The meeting ended coldly. She went back to her desk and started updating her resume that afternoon. The next week, Bob texted her again. He said, "Hey, sorry to bother you. The wife and I were wondering if you could at least watch the dog while we're at the office. We can't bring him to the hotel." She didn't even respond. She just forwarded the text to HR with a note. "I've already said no to hosting his family. Now he's asking me to pet sit. I feel harassed." HR called her in for a meeting. They said they'd have a word with Bob, but the tone suggested she was the problem for making a fuss. 3 days later, Bob's wife sent her a friend request on Facebook. She ignored it, then a message came through from the wife's account. "Hi, I'm so sorry to bother you. Bob told me you might be able to help us out. We're really struggling to find pet-friendly accommodations. Could you just watch our golden retriever for a few days? He's very well behaved." She stared at the message. Her own dog was a senior rescue with anxiety. She barely had time to take care of herself, and now Bob's wife was guilt-tripping her through social media. She replied, "I can't. Please stop contacting me." The wife wrote back, "I understand. Sorry to bother you." But it didn't stop. A week later, Bob approached her in the break room. He said, "I heard you've been talking to HR about me." "That's not cool," she said. "You asked me to host your family. I said no. You asked again. I said no. Then your wife messaged me. I'm not in the business of being your personal concierge." Bob's face went red. He said, "You know the CEO thinks you have an attitude problem. I was just trying to help you show some team spirit." She laughed. She actually laughed out loud. She said, "Bob, you've been promoted 3 times for doing nothing. I haven't had a raise in 4 years. And you want to lecture me about team spirit? Go book a hotel." She walked away. Later that day, she got an email from HR saying they'd received a complaint from Bob about her unprofessional behavior. She wrote back, "I'm documenting everything. Feel free to review the text messages." 3 weeks later, she found a new job. She gave 2 weeks' notice. Dick called her into his office and said, "I'm surprised you're leaving. I thought we had a good working relationship." She said, "We didn't. You gave me no raise, no respect, and you expected me to host your golden boy's family for free. That's not a good relationship." Dick said nothing. She walked out. On her last day, she got a call from a recruiter. The recruiter said, "I have a position that's a step up from your current role. The pay is significantly higher. Are you interested?" She said yes. She started the new job 2 weeks later. She got a raise, a title change, and a boss who actually respected her. She posted an update a few months later. She said she thought about Bob sometimes, wondered if he ever got his hotel. She didn't really care. But then she added something new. Bob's wife had reached out to her on LinkedIn. The wife said she found the whole thing embarrassing and apologized. She said Bob had been under a lot of pressure at work, and Dick kept pushing him to be more visible in the office, so he came up with the idea of staying with a coworker to save the company money. The wife said she had no idea Bob asked her, and she was horrified when she found out. The OOP replied politely, said no hard feelings, and wished the wife well. Then she blocked Bob's wife too. She said she didn't need any more drama from that chapter of her life. Her last comment was simple: "I don't believe in loyalty to a job anymore. I believe in doing good work, getting paid fairly, and leaving when it stops working. That's it." I read that and nodded. It was the same lesson from the loyalty post. You give your time, your energy, your skills, you show up, you do the work, that's the transaction. Anything beyond that is a gift, not an obligation. And when someone asks you to host their family for a week, you say no, you don't apologize. You just say no. I thought about my own ex, Nate. He had asked me to quit my job so he could take care of me. I didn't do it. I kept working. And then he dumped me for a coworker who didn't even want him. The irony wasn't lost on me. He wanted to be the provider, but he couldn't even keep a woman who smiled at him once. I closed the tab and went back to my own life. My new boyfriend Mark was making dinner. He called from the kitchen, "Hey, you want extra cheese on the pasta?" I smiled. "Yeah, extra cheese." He didn't ask me to host anyone. He didn't tell me to quit my job. He just made pasta and asked about my day. That's the kind of loyalty that matters, not to a job, not to a boss, but to the people who actually show up for you. And that's the story I keep coming back to. The one about the woman who said no, and the one about the guy who took the double salary, and the one about me finally learning to say no too. But that wasn't the last I heard from Nate. About 3 weeks after I started seeing Mark, I got a text from a number I didn't have saved. It said, "Hey, it's Nate. I know we haven't talked in months, but I really need to get something off my chest. Can we meet for coffee? Just once. I promise I won't make it weird." I stared at the screen for a full minute. My first instinct was to block him. I had spent 9 years twisting myself into knots for that man, working 2 jobs while he studied, holding his hand through depression, letting him love bomb me in December only to dump me on January 2nd like I was a pair of shoes that didn't fit. He had told me I wasn't wife material. He had told me I was just a girlfriend. And then he admitted he was in love with some coworker who barely knew his name, and now he wanted to get something off his chest. I didn't reply. I showed the text to my roommate, Sarah. She said, "Don't do it. He's just going to try to guilt you into taking him back because his little plan with the coworker blew up in his face." She was right. I knew she was right. But there was this tiny voice in my head that kept whispering, what if he actually has something important to say? What if he finally admits he was wrong? I hated that voice. I hated that after everything, I still cared enough to wonder. I let the text sit for 2 days. He sent another one, "Please, I just need closure for both of us." That word closure, it's such a trap. We tell ourselves we need it to move on, but most of the time, it's just an excuse to reopen a wound that's already healing. Still, I agreed. I picked a coffee shop near my apartment, a neutral spot where I could leave whenever I wanted. I told Mark I was meeting an old friend, which was a lie, and I felt guilty about it, but I didn't want him to worry. I got there 10 minutes early. I ordered a latte and sat at a table by the window watching the door. When Nate walked in, my stomach dropped. He looked different, thinner, tired, with dark circles under his eyes. He used to be so put together, always the one with the perfect hair and the confident smile. Now he looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He spotted me and gave a weak wave. He ordered nothing, just came straight to my table and sat down. "Thanks for coming," he said. His voice was hoarse. I didn't smile. "What's this about, Nate?" He took a deep breath. "I need to apologize. For everything, for how I ended things, for what I said, for all of it." I waited. He kept talking. "The coworker I told you about, the one I said I was in love with, I approached her after we broke up. I told her I had ended my relationship for her, that I wanted to be with her." He let out a bitter laugh. "She looked at me like I was insane." She said, "I don't even know you. We've said like 5 words to each other. Are you okay?" I felt a flicker of something, not satisfaction exactly, more like a quiet, cold confirmation. I had spent 9 years pouring my heart into someone who didn't even know how to read a room. He went on. "She told me I was a piece of trash for dumping you like that. She said if I ever spoke to her again, she'd report me to HR. I was humiliated. I realized I had thrown away the only person who ever really loved me for a fantasy." I set down my latte. "Nate, I'm sorry that happened, but I don't know what you expect me to do with that information." "I want you back," he said. "I know I don't deserve it, but I've been going to therapy. I've been working on myself. I realize now that I was scared of commitment and I took it out on you. You were perfect. I was the problem." It was almost funny. Here he was saying all the things I had wanted to hear for years, but it was too late. The words felt hollow, like lines from a script he had rehearsed. I shook my head. "Nate, I'm seeing someone now, a good guy. He doesn't ask me to quit my job. He doesn't love bomb me and then rip the rug out. He just shows up." His face crumpled. "Is it serious?" "It's new, but yes, it's serious. And even if it weren't, I wouldn't go back to you. You broke me. You made me feel like I wasn't enough, like everything I did for 9 years meant nothing. I don't trust you. I don't think I ever will again." He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. "I came here to hear what you had to say. Now I've heard it, and I'm leaving." I stood up. He grabbed my wrist. "Please, just give me one more chance. I'll prove it to you." I looked down at his hand on my arm, physical contact I hadn't invited, just like the old days when he would touch me to get his way. "Let go of me," I said quietly. He did. I walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. My hands were shaking, but my heart was steady. That was the moment I knew I had truly moved on. Not because I didn't feel anything, I felt a lot. Sadness for the girl I used to be, anger at the time I wasted, relief that it was finally over, but no longing, no what if. When I got home, I told Mark the truth. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "You handled that really well. I'm proud of you." I cried then, not for Nate, but for myself, for finally choosing me. I never heard from Nate again. A few months later, a mutual friend told me he had moved out of state to live with his parents. He left his job, burned all his bridges. The coworker he had pined after got promoted and started dating someone from another department. She never gave Nate a second thought. I thought about that sometimes, how he had torched his entire life for a woman who didn't even know his last name. And how I had spent 9 years trying to be everything for a man who never knew how to be anything for himself. I don't believe in loyalty to a job anymore. I don't believe in loyalty to a partner who treats you like an option. I believe in showing up for the people who show up for you and for yourself. That's the real lesson from all of this. Whether it's a boss who wants you to host his family for free, or a boss who expects you to turn down a life-changing salary out of loyalty, or an ex who thinks he can come back after crushing your heart, the answer is the same. No is a complete sentence, and it's the most powerful one you'll ever learn. That story about loyalty to a job, about saying no, about knowing your worth, it stuck with me for weeks. I kept scrolling through Reddit looking for more posts that hit that same nerve, and I found one that made me stop cold. It was from a guy who worked at his first job for 6 years. 6 years. They trained him from the ground up. He had a great boss, a boss who fought for his promotions, who doubled his salary over that time. And then he got an offer from a more prestigious company, double the salary. We're talking 120,000 to 250,000, life-changing money. He quit without thinking twice. He didn't even ask his boss to match it because he knew the boss couldn't. Part of the new comp was stock, and the salary was probably more than the boss made. He gave his notice, explained his transition plan, thought he was being respectful. But his boss was devastated, really angry. They stayed professional, but it got heated. The boss questioned his loyalty, said it was a character flaw. The guy said, "I paid you back with my hard work, we're even. Arguably, you got a bargain because I could have jumped ship 2 years ago." He didn't say that last part out loud, but he thought it. His wife and friends said he was being cold and calculating, that he should have shown more loyalty since the company gave him so much. But he didn't see it that way. He said, "I've seen people walk out after 2 decades with a pink slip and no one shed a tear the next morning. What is loyalty to a job supposed to mean?" And he was right. I thought about my own situation, how I had poured 9 years into a guy who dumped me like I was a placeholder. How I had given my loyalty to someone who never earned it. How that boss expected loyalty when he couldn't even match the offer. It's the same thing. You give your time, your effort, your heart, and then they act like you owe them more, like walking away is a betrayal. But it's not. It's just business. It's just life. You look out for yourself because no one else will. The comments on that post were brutal. People told him he was not the asshole. One person said, "Years ago I hired a young associate, smart, motivated. 8 months in, he came to me acting odd." His uncle owned a company that sold expensive stuff to the DoD and they just lost their corporate lawyer. He had to fly out that night for an interview. He was shaking, felt guilty. I told him, "If it's a better opportunity, you have to take it. Don't worry about loyalty to me. Loyalty is earned, not demanded." He got the job, tripled his salary. We stayed friends. That's what a good boss does. Another commenter said, "I hired a talented software engineer at entry level. Enroll progressions at my company are competitive, but you can also apply to level up in another team. He left for a better role and I was proud of him. That's the right way to handle it." The OOP's boss wasn't a good boss. He was a boss who wanted to own his employees' future, and that's not loyalty, that's control. I read the whole thread, every comment. Some people argued that the company made him, that he owed them something. But the guy countered, he worked hard, he contributed to their bottom line. He didn't steal from them, he didn't slack off. He gave them 6 years of his life. That's not debt, that's a transaction. And when I thought about my own job, about Bob the golden boy who wanted me to host his family for a week, about Dick the CEO who silently demoted me for having a baby, I realized I had been living the same story. I stayed too long because I felt loyal. I felt obligated. I thought if I just kept my head down and worked hard, they'd recognize my worth. But they didn't, they just kept asking for more. And when Bob asked me to house his wife, toddler, and dog for a week, and then added that he could ask the company to pay for his accommodations if that didn't work, I wanted to scream. I didn't. I took an aspirin and went to my meeting with Dick where he brought it up like it was a reasonable request. But after reading that post about the guy who quit for double the salary, something clicked. I started updating my resume that night. I applied to 3 jobs. I didn't tell anyone. I just did it because I finally understood loyalty is not a one-way street, and if they won't pay you what you're worth, you owe them nothing. Not your weekends, not your spare bedroom, not your silence. I didn't land a new job overnight. It took a few months, but I got one. Same industry, better pay, better culture. When I gave my notice to Dick, he looked shocked. He asked why. I said, "Better opportunity." He said, "But we've invested so much in you, we relied on you." I just smiled. "I know and I'm grateful, but I have to do what's best for me." He didn't fight me, he just nodded, all stiff and uncomfortable. And I walked out feeling lighter than I had in years. Bob never did ask me to host his family again. After I left, I heard through the grapevine that he asked another woman in the office. She said no too. And then Dick had to deal with the fact that his golden boy couldn't even get his own family accommodations without begging coworkers. Karma. So yeah, that's the thread that ties it all together. The girlfriend who finally said no to her ex. The guy who quit for $250,000. The woman who refused to be a free Airbnb. We all learned the same lesson. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Whether it's a job, a partner, or a boss, if they don't respect your boundaries, they don't deserve your loyalty. And the only person you truly owe anything to is yourself.